Good evening, and welcome to the Monday, February 28th, 2022 School Board Public Hearing and Work Session. The time is currently 6:30 p.m. The school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. Mrs. Tuttle, can we get the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mr. Sampson by Zoom.
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Matheson.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Doran.
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Marati.
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith.
Here.
Thank you. And Mrs. Luke.
Here.
Thank you. The board has a quorum.
Thank you. Public hearing, fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. Goal and objective: ensure students, staff, families, and the community are informed, connected, and engaged with the district. Public testimony is welcome on the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. We will start first with those who have signed up ahead of time. Rebecca Dune. If you can state your name, spell your last name, give your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for taking my testimony. This is Rebecca Dunn, and I live in Fairbanks. So I'm testifying on the budget and the proposal to cut elementary music and art classes. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. So you, as the school board, have had a lot of opportunity to hear how arts programs are important to students and families in our community over the past few years, but especially last meeting as you took testimony on Music in Our Schools Month. I know that you all understand the value of learning music and art to children's development, including working on fine motor skills, learning to work together as a team to create something meaningful, and the opportunity to practice some discipline and patience. It seems like every year this district attempts to cut music and art. And every year, parents, students, teachers tell you how important these programs are to their students. It's a little bit confusing why these programs that are clearly so valuable to so many people are consistently on the chopping block. As you consider cutting these valuable and popular programs that you have praised at previous meetings, please also think about who is really losing when you cut them. You're leaving behind those students who might find their home in music class or art class if only they had access. Those kids who maybe don't do well in sports or don't excel at reading or math, but stay in school because they love band class. Certainly, some parents will continue to pay for music and art lessons and instruments and materials for their children, but most families in Fairbanks can't afford that. Classes at school are the only way that most children have the opportunity to discover and practice art and music. Parents, students, and community members are looking to you to make a decision that will create equitable opportunities for all students in this district, not to cut the arts and create a community in which only the most privileged children have access. Thank you very much for taking my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony this evening. Next, we have Bonnie Marriott.
Hello,
If you could give us your name, spell your last name, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Bonnie Marriott, Marriott, and I live in Fairbanks. I'm a high school senior and I play many instruments, primarily flute. I'd like to play for just a snippet. I have signed early decision to attend Smith College in Massachusetts. I will enter their engineering program this fall, and I've worked hard in school and done well. The music programs in our elementary, middle, and high schools are a huge part of why I have been successful. I've benefited from them every year of my education. Because of our music programs, I have learned not just music performance and theory, but also discipline, persistence, and mathematics, and gained the ability to perform in public, which gives me confidence to do things like speak to you tonight. Music is an essential part of education, every bit as important as mathematics and reading. Music education teaches consistent dedication to practice, strength of will to overcome difficulties, and builds teamwork and commitment to group success. Every year we learn the school board is thinking of reducing our music and art offerings, but these programs are critical to keep our public education healthy and successful. They help our schools produce students like me who are motivated to do well and encouraged to explore. I don't want students younger than me to miss out on the opportunities that I have had. We need to keep our music programs healthy and whole at all levels of education. Please vote to fund our music programs at all levels of Fairbanks Public Education. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, as well as the beautiful solo. Next, we have Jim Jenoso. If you'll come up to the mic, state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? My name is Jim Jenoso, Janoso.
I think we're having an issue with your mic.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear it? My name is Jim Jenoso, Janoso, and I'm from Fairbanks. My name is Jim Jenoso, and I'm a mechanical engineer and small business owner here in Fairbanks. I started my business in 2002. Today, it takes me all over Alaska, as well as many other parts of the world, including Chile, New Zealand, and even Antarctica twice a year. But it is Fairbanks I chose to be my home. I'm the parent of a third grader at Barnett Magnet School. My daughter Aurora, my wife Erin, and many of my customers here in Fairbanks love the music and the arts. As a matter of fact, if I had to describe what makes Fairbanks Fairbanks and what it is that brought me here and my small business here to this town, I tell you it was the concerts, the musicals, and the theater shows. The music and the art that allows my family to love this place, even when it's 40 below zero and dark for most of the winter. It's what Fairbanks is. It's what allows Fairbanks to thrive despite its challenges. It attracts new families. It helps keep businesses like mine here. Engineers and business people are not all numbers and science. We need balance that the music and arts provide us and our children. It provides pathways to their futures. My family is happy all winter long because of the music and the arts that they're involved with here, and so my business and I stay. Yet this school district is proposing to cut music and arts education off at its knees by cutting all elementary band, orchestra, and choir. As a business owner, I understand cash flow and budget crunches. In times of budget shortfalls, as dramatic as this one, cuts become unavoidable. But making them to programs that are such a vital importance to our students and our community's sustainability is short-sighted and I feel fiscally irresponsible. Thankfully, these cuts are not yet final. You have the power to change them. I am here today to ask you to do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Dorn, is it a clarifying question? Right.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Jenoso, for being here tonight. It's not intended to put you on the spot, but I think I am.
Go for it.
So if we kept band orchestra at the elementary level, would you see something, anything else in the budget jumps out at you as, oh, I'd trade this band orchestra and give up this?
If you put those in front of me, I might have some choices. I don't know what's on the chopping block for sure, but I know it's been a part of my life since I was young. It's been a part of many people that I've known as they've grown up. And I believe in that point in their lives in middle school is when children learn languages best. I mean, my daughter's picking up German faster than I wish I could. And that goes as well with music. So to start children out at a later age is going to inhibit them. It's going to give them at a disadvantage. There's many colleges that these kids can go to on full scholarships as long as they have the abilities. And that starts early on. It doesn't start later on. And that's my belief.
Thank you.
I don't know. I can't answer your question directly if you were to lay some out in front of me. There might be ones that aren't as important to me, but maybe important to other people. But this is important to me, and that's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, we have Rachel Naumann. Naumann? If you could, is she on? If we could have you state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Rachel Naumann. It's Naumann, and I live in Fairbanks. I just wanted to do a testimony on keeping LAD K through 8. My daughter attends, and when I brought up to her about the possibility of having to change, she stated that she was really upset. So I explained to her that some of the reasonings that we have heard was, military. It was a big military families go there. We're military ourselves. And I said, people are saying like military kids, you bounce back, you change all the time. And she goes, but Mom, this is the most stable that I can be when I leave. I don't have a choice to move. I have a choice to stay here. They have this program for me. This is where I know I'm going to be until we leave again. So I'm asking you to think of that this program for us, for our military kids, that they don't have a choice. They don't have a voice to pack their stuff up and leave. She is happy that she has the same routine. She knows that she's going to go to the same school. Whether it may not be the same teacher, she knows that she's going to be able to go there. Also, if you do make a decision, I would ask if you can make something soon, just because it's PCS season coming up. And I know a couple people that I'm helping that are moving and coming to Alaska. They ask, what are the schools? And when they find out there's a K through 8 school, they get really excited about that. And there's a family I'm helping now, and she's so excited that her kids, all of them, can stay at the same school. So I do ask, if you guys are going to make a decision, if you could make it as soon as possible, just so we have expectations and what to look forward, and also kind of let the other families know what's going on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have Jen Gunderson. If you'll come up to the microphone, state your name, spell your last name, and give us your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to testify.
I'm Jen Gunderson, Gunderson, and I live in Fairbanks. I'm testifying today to request that the board reconsider the amount of money that will be allocated to the Best Homeschool program. According to the proposed budget, almost $600,000 will go to the homeschool program. As far as I know, there hasn't been any indication that the homeschool program is in demand. In fact, our community already has a number of homeschool programs. Usually when one makes an investment of this magnitude, research must be shown that suggests the investment is a sound decision and will provide returns. I haven't seen any of this. That doesn't seem logical or reasonable when, at the same time, we are closing schools and ending programs for students. I find it outrageous that we can't afford band and orchestra for elementary students, but we can spend $500,000 to fund the homeschool program. I would also like to suggest that if teachers and support staff are not getting any more money for the next 3 years, then our chief school administrator should not receive a $15,000 raise as proposed in the budget. The refusal of a raise by those in leadership could signify solidarity with teachers and support staff who are bearing the brunt of the budget cuts. The decisions to cut school programs, close schools, pack middle schools, not give teachers and support staff the pay they deserve, while at the same time putting a huge amount of money into homeschool and raises for administration, makes it very clear what the priorities are in this district. And these priorities are not in line with enriching public schools for the public good.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Next, we have Mady Agopina. And I apologize if I stated your name wrong. If you will just state your name, spell your last name, and you will have, give your area of residence. You'll have 2 minutes to testify.
Hi, my name is Maite Agopian, Agopian. I'm from Fairbanks. I'm giving a testimony in relation to my concern about cutting the band and orchestra in elementary from the budget. Both of my children will be out of elementary by this summer. They never attended orchestra or band in elementary because they have the luxury to have parents who can afford, economically and time-wise, private music lessons. But the privilege of learning an instrument this way cannot be the new norm. Public schools need to serve every child and give equal opportunities to all. We all know that learning a language or an instrument at an early age has much benefit in other curriculum areas. Since we don't teach additional languages to our children, please, let's not take their instruments. Learning to play an instrument is work. It takes patience and time. Taking that foundation time prior to middle school, before the workload starts to significantly increase, before hormones and other priorities might kick in, is the only way to add these building blocks, like we do for math or English, towards quality performances of all sorts that our community then benefits from. Starting in elementary is the only way to offer every child the opportunity to excel in an art form that might help them not only to find their own voice or a safe group of peers or navigate through middle and high school, but also beyond, earning the chance to receive a university scholarship or a job in the field of music. Title I elementary schools are getting closed. Children are getting moved in new schools, and now you want to take their instruments away. Please don't. I feel it's a lot. These have been a rough few years for them. Let's give them some space for joy. This is the time where we would actually need more music and art in our school, not less. Please don't cut these programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have Rachel Reed. Is Rachel online? If you'll state
Yes, I am.
If you'll state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
My name is Rachel Reed. Last name is R-E-A-D, and I'm here to testify regarding the budget. I am extremely concerned, as according to the numbers that the district has provided for special education for the 3 middle schools, they're only calculating 178 special education students attending the 3 middle schools here in town. They are estimating that Ryan is not going to have any change in their special education enrollment, which I find odd considering they are picking up a 6th grade class. Also, I'm extremely concerned about the number of IEPs that are going to have to be conducted after the spring break. And also with the change in numbers, there is a $6,700 difference in what is calculated from SPED versus what should be. The budget is also calling for 14 to 23 middle school teachers. However, if we're dividing that up by the 5 different middle schools, that's allocated 1 special ed teacher per grade at each middle school and 1 dedicated self-contained classroom SPED teacher. Not to mention if they're hiring 24 new SPED staff, where are they going? I love to see the inconsiderate funding in the brick and mortar schools with lack of budget increase, all while continuously increasing the budget for the homeschool, the district employees, and the charter schools. Ms. Maloon's exact words were charter schools are funded according to state statute. They are allocated funding and are responsible for their own facility and programming, as well as an elected academic policy committee that works with the school to set their school policy. The district has an agreement with charter schools in which a portion of their funding is given to the district for services such as HR and IT. And yet, if you look at the budget, the school district is allocating funds to pay rent, communication, electricity, garbage, water, sewer, etc. So perhaps someone can clarify what exactly the charter schools are paying with their funding if the district is paying everything else. Ms. Maloon also states that the charter
Ms.
schools are
Reed?
the best program. Yes?
Ms. Reed, that was 2 minutes. Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have David DeLong. David. If you could start by saying your first name, spelling your last name, giving us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Hello, my name is David DeLong, D-E-L-O-N-G. I live in Fairbanks. And, you know, I'm speaking about the cutting of the orchestra and band programs in the elementary schools, the music program, and the arts program. You must not do this, you know, especially if you kill music in the elementary schools, you basically kill it in the school system because they got to get it when they're young. And no elementary school kids are going to have the training or the ability to come in and, you know, do it in the later grades. So it's over. And Fairbanks is a town that's had music in its history for a long time. So, you know, find something else to cut. Don't cut teacher positions. There's got to be, you know, the administration raises, $15,000 raise. Let's, you know, get our priorities straight. This is something that's really important to a lot of people. And it's something that, you know, speaks to our equality as a community. You know, we need to let all kids have the opportunity to learn music. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Justice Soleil. If you'll come up to the microphone, state your first name, spell your last name, and give us your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to testify.
Mic check. My name is Justice Soleil, last name S-O-U-L-E, and I live in Fairbanks. I'm a graduate of the school district Hutchinson High School Arts AV program. One of the positions being cut this year is media production specialist in the admin center. What you don't hear in that title is print shop in the basement of the admin center. What the print shop does is print posters, business cards, envelopes, student planners, parent and employee handbooks, carbon copy forms, notepads, student newspapers such as the Pay Streak at Lathrop, yearbooks, and even your budget books, all of which come at significant cost savings compared to local print shops. Did you know that the tabs get hand collated and coiled? Every one of those books were hand coiled by the media production specialist. In FY21 print shop billing sheet, I billed more than I earned in wages. That position is justified. What isn't justified is deleting this position that supports the 38, soon to be 36 school sites for their print requests. You will not see cost savings as a result of this cut, but rather cost increase for outsourcing your print jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. Any other testimonies from the audience this evening? If you'll come up, state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to testify.
My name is Wendy Ward. Can you hear me? Hello? Testing?
Did you push the...
Hello?
There you go.
Sorry. My name is Wendy Ward, W-A-R-D, and I live in Fairbanks on the Hot Springs Road. I was one of the itinerant band teachers. I taught 4th, 5th, 6th grade students how to play band instruments and did that for 30 years in Fairbanks. Each student would have a 30-minute small group band lesson once a week. They would also have a large group rehearsal once a week during the lunch and recess time. Each band student would miss only 30 minutes of regular class time per week. I scheduled these lessons with the approval of the classroom teachers. 6th graders who started in 4th grade became mini musicians. I'm so disappointed that this way of teaching instrumental students by itinerant specialists is not being maintained. There are lots of details to learn in starting an instrument. For example, with each wind instrument player, there's an exact embouchure formation, that's the mouth area. Is the bottom lip over the teeth? Is it loose or tight? Where do the top teeth go? How do you breathe? It is critical to give attention to the individual player about these details. Bad habits can be easily developed. Scheduled for next year is the elimination of itinerant instrumental music teachers. Introduction of the band and orchestra instruments will be a part of the 5th grade curriculum during the 2nd semester of school. The following year, beginning band and orchestra classes will be offered in 6th grade at their new school. And I'm thinking in their new school, 6th graders are going to be overwhelmed when they go to a new school. How many of them are going to want to start an instrument in front of new students in a new school? Is this the destruction of the band and orchestra programs? Through the years, they will get a great start in elementary school in small groups with a specialist. The instruments for beginners are already at the schools. Through the years, I have heard students testify to the importance of vocal and instrumental music in this great school district. Students would say, "I found my people. It kept me in school. Music is a lifelong
Ms. Ward.
passion. Let's continue it with quality education."
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And I saw we had another one. If you'll just come up, state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Need a push button?
Is the green light on? Wait, yep, just push it once.
There we go. Thank you. My name is Teresa Reed, and I live in Fairbanks. And for 17 of those years, I taught general music at Barnett. And the school, thank you for serving on the board. It's a terrible job, but I'm glad you do it. And I know you have to make lots of decisions. We would never think of cutting reading, but we think of cutting music because it's, oh, that's the fun thing, and they're not really doing any school. I just want to be the voice of your reminder to tell you that if a child is in an orchestra or a band or a choir, they have to read, they have to focus, they have to learn the intricate ratios of music timing, they have to wait their turn, they have to cooperate, they have to find out what their talents are, they have to recognize other people's talents. They have to work together to produce something. And when they're finished and have graduated school, they'll have a skill that they can use forever. I sing at the Pioneer Home every week, and my 90-year-olds sing songs they learned in school. So everything in music classes is exactly what the school district is trying to do in every class. It's not extra. It's absolutely core. Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Any other testimonies from the audience? Seeing none, we will, testimony is now closed. We'll go on to our next agenda item. Number 1, fiscal year 2022-2023 budget discussion and work. Core value: center everything we do on the student and student learning. Fiscal year 2022-2023 budget discussion and work, including but not limited to maintaining LAD as a K through 8 school, human resources development, and communications development and engagement department. We'd like to turn the time over to administration.
Thank you, President Luke. I'd like to invite the executive directors that are involved in tonight's meeting to the table so we can be a part of the conversation. So with that, in your packet, you saw some information concerning what a K-8 at LAD might look like from the district's perspective, and then some information from Corey Anthony, the principal at LAD now. So you have that information in front of you. Ms. Anthony is in the room for questions if she has, if there's questions for her specifically, and the rest of the ED team would be ready to answer any questions that you might have concerning impacts on the district as a whole. So with that, we'll open it up for questions, and if you have any for Ms. Anthony, she's here ready to answer your questions.
Could we have Ms. Anthony come up and just to one of the mics, just in case we have questions for her?
Sure.
Thank you. I'd like to start with questions from the board. Mr. Doran, I was ready for you.
That's right. I never disappoint. So, thank you, Ms. Anthony, and the administration for putting a plan forward for our consideration on this. Two of the questions I'd like to start with is each put forth a target PTR, which I think is an important consideration given our financial condition. My question is in terms of, let me put a couple aspects together and then you can address it all at once. One is if we get timeline to get a response for that, get information out for parents so that they know this is an option, not just for those at LAD currently, but for the other schools, and particularly for Arctic Light if those parents who are already, their children are already in that grade range might transfer over. So I'm thinking of that timeline, and what if we're one student short? What if we're 30 students over? And then the piece of that, which actually one of our testifiers mentioned this evening, military PCSing. I know in the past we've tried to make some accommodations for them with other lotteries. So if you could address that, excuse me, address that picture.
So, so first to the timeline. I believe on the board's agenda tomorrow is a vote, at which time so tomorrow is when the decision would be made if we're moving forward with LAD as a K-8. So at that time, then the school can start recruiting and informing parents and working to get something going and concrete. I think the challenge that we have here is with the timeline and having an enrollment by a certain date. The challenge for that, and I'm gonna say this, and if Ms. Anthony has any clarification, she can do that. I think the challenge is that that enrollment in all of our schools of choice, Barnett, Hutch, go on all year long. So some students might leave, some students might come, and they maintain that PTR. And to your PTR question, to have a K-8 that that is a district K-8 and holding them to the same that same level of staffing as the rest of them, we just felt was appropriate. So again, to the timeline, I guess I think it's important that if we make a decision to go forward with K-8, that we let them go forward. And we see how it plays out. We decide, is this working? Is this not working? The challenge that we come when we have a date, you have to have this many on there, is exactly what Mr. Doran said. So what if we come to April 15th and we're 2 students shy? Or we're 3 students shy? When do we draw the line? Do we get all of these parents enrolled and then on April 15th, oh no, we're not doing it? So that gives a little bit of difficulty when we come to putting a time on an enrollment day or by this day. So that's one thing on the timeline issue that I can see. And so I think when it comes to timeline, tomorrow we could decide one way or the other, and that will start our timeline. And then the security of our folks coming into our community that are coming through the military, that confidence that if we choose this, then this is the school that we have, and that it's not going to go away from us on April 15th. So those are a couple of my comments on the timeline and the PTR. I don't know if Ms. Anthony has more comments.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. It's hard to build a school and recruit people if we don't know that it's going to happen. So I agree with what Ms. Moline was saying there, that we want to either know it's happening or know that it's not. As far as the logistics go, I looked at all of the other schools that have their lotteries this spring, and the middle of April is a date that many of them are like viewing and contacting parents. So I think it would make sense for us to fall in line with that. It'd take a couple days for our school district to adjust the lottery that we already have in place so that it's not just 7th, 8th grade, but that we could include the 6th. I could see that starting then, a week after the vote is made, if it's in the affirmative. And then, we want to have it open for about a month to give people time to be able to make their decisions. We could then contact families the middle of April 15th, and then you have to give them a couple days to decide if they want to confirm. So, I think we would know that, and it would be in that timeline. But again, that there is that fear of, well, if we're too short or 3 more. In the past, what we've done too is we've kept some available for military families that are moving in after this spring, right? Which we know is the reality, is we're going to have many that move in throughout the 4th quarter and in the summer. And so we'd like to be able to keep that. We also can keep a spot for staff children that might move to our school. There's some reasons why you keep a couple positions open. So that's it as far as timeline goes. If we want to talk PTR, I have some feelings about that as well, but maybe one at a time, or do you want me to talk PTR? What?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I get it. I get that we're looking at 29 students in the middle schools, and I just want to remind people that the reason why families and children select a K-8, such as LAD, is because they feel like their student has some additional needs that may not be met as well in a larger setting. And so that's something for us to remember and keep in mind. For example, I don't want to go into too many specifics because it wouldn't keep it would be hard to keep people confidential, and I want to respect the dignity of all of our students. But right now in our 7th and 8th, we have approximately 27% of those students who are receiving special education services. That's significantly higher than a standard classroom. We also have 14% that receive dominant language tutoring, so not just ELL services, but the most intensive level of that. We have 9% who have 504s, and then we have a whole handful of other students that just need some additional love and support that we're able to give them. So that's why in the past we have stuck in the low 20s. I think that going to 25 is really reasonable. I think that going to 29 is going to be hard for these children. So I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Could I do a follow-up, and then I'll pause?
Okay, one follow-up. Yep.
Yeah. Talking about the timeline, and you mentioned April 15th, and yes, that's on our agenda for tomorrow. But just to get a sense, is that enough time to get this rolling, get it out there, being cognizant that we have a week of spring break in there, and that from the administration point of view, that do you need a little bit more time? Do you need a little less? I'm just concerned when you were talking about the timeline and some of the issues that were coming up that we don't tie it. We know we need the response. We need the students to make it financially sound. At the same time, by putting a date specific, are we tying your hands or too much? Just something that we would be considering as we approach tomorrow. No decisions tonight.
Right, so if I understand your question correctly, it's they need to have the enrollment by the 15th that your question is about, because what Ms. Anthony was saying is that on the 15th, they would look at the open seats and see who was on the affirmative. So at some point, you need to do that. So we would open it up, and also, as she mentioned, the other schools that have lotteries, that's kind of their time. So I think that would be an adequate time. I'll let Ms. Anthony talk further to that.
Yeah, when I look at the schedule, I look at the calendar, look at spring break being in there, I do think it's reasonable to give us about a week to get it all together, and a month or so to have families make their decision of whether or not they'd like to put in for the lottery. And then that would give us until about, when I looked at my schedule, maybe the 8th that we would close it. And then it gives us a week to go through all of the applications and make sure that they're accurate and things are in place. Because it's, you have to kind of go through and screen things, and then contact the families. So I do think that the middle of April is a reasonable time for us to contact families and receive confirmation. I do also think that if families think that it's not a sure thing, like we don't actually know that LAD is going to happen, then they will just say yes to one of the other schools instead of maybe saying yes to LAD. So that's where it's a little unclear for families. Like, they need to know that this is something that's happening. Maybe they don't know how many students will be in or how many classrooms, but if they know that it's a possibility for some 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, then I think they may be more willing to take that risk to fill out the lottery. If that makes sense.
Thank you. We have Ms. Smith, myself, and Ms. Marati.
Thank you. Ms. Moline, I had heard you say during our school closure process that the schools that had the 7-8 as a lottery school of choice had trouble even getting a reasonable number of students. Was that an issue at LAD, and do we expect that to be different? That we're expecting the families from the other schools to sort of all converge there? I just want to know, do we think it's going to be an issue to make that number, or are we really confident?
Well, to the confidence, we need to defer to Miss Anthony. She's the one that deals with the families. So, Miss Anthony?
I guess it matters what number you're aiming for, right? I think that we can very easily have a 7-8 combination class, a multi-age class, and I think that we can gather 6th grade from our school and from others. Mr. Doran mentioned Arctic Light, and that's something that's in my proposal, I think maybe the admin's proposal as well, to invite maybe the Arctic Light and the Joy 7th graders over to LAD so that they can finish at a K-8. I have not talked to those principals. I don't know the interest of those families. So I don't know for sure whether or not they would be interested in coming to LAD to finish for 8th grade or not. But I think it's a very reasonable thing. We have always had fewer 8th graders than we have 7th because the family's PCS. And so they're really interested in staying at the school for another year, and then there's not as many that are sticking around for 8th grade because they're moving. And so that's something to keep in mind as we're looking at how to balance the numbers coming in, right? I don't want 2 years from now to not then have any 6 because we took too many 8th, or right? So we'll just have to kind of look through how that would work. But I feel confident that a class of 6th graders and a class of 7th and 8th graders is very doable. I think that there is a potential to have other 6th graders, especially from Tanana feeder schools, be able to take the bus to Tanana and then come over. We're 5 minutes delayed from one another, so they start 5 minutes before us. That would be a very simple thing for any of the students who would be bused to Tanana to be able to walk over to LAD. And so I think that's something that opens things up, which we haven't had in the past because we weren't aligned time-wise prior to this year. So I do think that there's a lot of potential out there. And of course, we could be open to the entire district, but then people need to provide their own transportation.
I'll just add in that I also share that confidence that we would be able to staff, to have the students to support an entire 6th grade class and a combined 7th and 8th grade class. I would not have quite as much confidence if we were expecting 3 full 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes, but a 7th and 8th grade combined class, I have equal confidence with Corey.
Thank you. Actually, my big question to administration was having the 6th and then the 7-8 split, and why we did not do the 6th, 7th, and then 8th grade class. But my follow-up to that question, because you've already answered that, was if we have an entire class of 6th graders and then we have a 7th, 8th split, is there a possibility of kind of setting us up for being way too many students trying to apply for the 7th, 8th grade class the following year?
Yes. Yes, it's a concern. And that's what I was saying is we would have to look at it carefully and talk to families. What we wouldn't want to do is invite somebody to join us for 6th grade and then say that we don't have room for them in 7th or 8th. So it might be something that is fluid. It might be something that initially we have a 6th grade and then a 7-8, but then as the next year comes, maybe we have 2 classes of 6, 7, 8. And so things can get balanced a little bit differently depending on the needs and the numbers. So we have that flexibility.
So the one point that I would like to just to make clear for the board, and that is, when we're staffing for our schools, we're not going to have additional staff. It will just be moving staff from the other 3 middle schools into this middle school. And the other thing in the impacts from the district is that of the possibility of needing a special education classroom, and that would constitute an additional teacher and possibly 2 aides, which would be an increase to the budget. So those are just 2 things to make really clear, that when we're talking about staffing, we staff to the students, but it's not as tidy as, you know, you have extra teachers. So I just want to make that clear.
And I would just add on to that, I don't know if Derek's on this line somewhere. That currently we are K-8 and our self-contained classrooms stop at 6th grade, and those kiddos that are in 7th, 8th continue their self-contained program at the middle schools. So that is something that can happen, or SPED can decide a different configuration. But yes, we have 3 self-contained classrooms right now, plus preschool. And so if we were going to try to keep all of our self-contained up through 8th grade, that would absolutely require additional staffing. But there's obviously flexibility in that.
Ms. Marati?
Will this change anything about the school closure with some of the Nordell students going to LAD, or will all of that stay the same?
That will all remain the same. This will be a school of choice. So essentially, it would be a K-5 neighborhood school and a 6, 7, 8 school of choice in one building. So we're actually talking about 2 separate schools, and the school closures wouldn't impact that any differently to those K-5 students.
Ms. Matheson?
Thank you. How many Fort Wainwright students do you have, percentage-wise, at your school?
Currently, it's about 80 to 85%. I don't know what it will be next year, but the Birchwood home families that are coming, that have been going to Nordell, many of those families are also affiliated with Fort Wainwright because of the location. But I don't know how that balance, what that percentage would be next year.
How many do you believe will stay for 6th, 7th, and 8th of those Fort Wainwright families? And can they stay?
I don't have a clear answer because we haven't asked. So usually by this time, we're starting to really push it out there, see what people are interested in, give them the choice, and we kind of need that decision made by the board before we can reach out. I know that there was a lot of interest at student-led conferences that we just had, where the parents were there with their kiddos and talking to teachers about it. So I know there's buzz, but I don't have a number or anything. And I'm not sure if I understood the second part of the question about whether or not they can stay.
So if they're going to school kindergarten through 5th, and they want to stay for 6th, 7th, and 8th, do they still have to apply for the lottery, or because they are students of LAD, would they be allowed to stay?
Thank you. I understand that question now. So the way that it has worked in the past, that I propose we continue to do, unless somebody else has a different idea, is that there's different priority given to different students, and the priority of being in attendance at LAD, being a LAD student, is weighted the most, right? And then in the attendance area of the school, and then siblings in the school, and so it kind of trickles down like that. And so we have experienced in the past that anybody who wanted to stay at LAD has been able to stay through the lottery system.
Mr. Doran, and then we have Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this. I'm really glad to see it come forward. I really like the idea of giving some prioritization to parents whose students are currently in K-8 schools, Joy and Arctic Light, because I know the three of your schools were all given the go-ahead by the board, and you each put a lot of planning in. But circumstances change. LAD is in a position to continue. There are just slight differences between sort of the two outlines proposals, and just checking with the administration, are they amenable to, I mean, are there any things that we're looking at as would be problematic that should be part of our discussion tomorrow?
The only, I think, a real, well, two things. One is the budgetary requirement if we have an additional sped class there. So that would be one consideration, that it would increase the budget. And the second, the only like primary difference would be in the PTR. And we would contend that if it's a middle school, we need to go with the PTR at 29. So those are the two main concerns that we would have.
And could I do a follow-up?
Go ahead, Mr. Doran.
On the SPED issue, we don't have district-wide programs at every school and for every level. So that would partially be dependent upon whether that same expense would be whichever school it would be actually in. So if we had to create another SPED district-wide program, because of the number of students, it would be wherever it is, or we fill up the ones that we have.
Right.
Is that right? So that's really not.
So that, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is that that there wouldn't be an additional cost because those students would go into. So that's not entirely how it would work. So I'm going to let Mr. Coryell kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think just, you know, when I wrote the notes that went into the packet tonight, that, you know, there's an if and there's a it could. So it's not set in stone, but it's just an odd anomaly, Mr. Doran, is that we have a total of approximately 45 students that will be in our intensive resource programs in middle school. So we're going to need to open a third program based on the students moving up. So that's going to be 3. So there's an added classroom. So the thing is at LAD right now, it's kind of like if all the students who are in 6th and above go, we can add that classroom at Ryan. All the students, we can meet those needs without that third classroom at LAD. So it's just kind of teetering. So if it's no matter if the kids stay or go at LAD, we're still going to need 3 classrooms at middle school. So again, it's just an anomaly based on the numbers are so close. So yeah, we can't meet the needs at middle school without 3 programs, period. But the question is, do we need 2 or 3 programs at LAD right now?
Follow-up.
Go ahead.
Okay. So then my clarity seems to be the decision on letting LAD remain K-8. The SPED question is they're not connected because you're going to have an additional program no matter where, and it can be put in any one of the schools. It's not a LAD K-8 issue. The issue might be whether LAD has the space and it makes sense for those students, similar to, well, let me just say that they are 2 separate issues.
So what I would tell you is there's with the 3 programs at LAD, if the kids stayed, then we would still need 3 programs. So we would be adding a program to our existing number of programs. If the kids all went, potentially, we would go down to 2 classrooms at LAD. So the net would be equal at that if we had 2 and then we move 1 to middle school.
Right.
But there's
So
going to be
they're separate issues. They're K-8 being K-8. Where those kids go, they may be in a more, if we want to say, a traditional middle school, or they may be at LAD. You have the program, it's just a matter of which building it's in.
No, we would need an additional program to meet the needs. Like, we would likely need
Right.
an additional program to what we have right now, so it would be
But
the
not
cost of an.
necessarily at LAD.
Well, yeah, the LAD, we would likely be down to 2 programs at LAD, so that would give us an open position that's already in the budget that can move to middle school to meet those needs.
Okay, so they're separate. Thank you.
Mr. DeCrow?
And Mr. Coryell can correct me if I'm wrong, but depending on where students go and pan out in this situation, it's a distinct possibility we'll have $200,000 to $250,000 in additional special ed costs needed.
That's correct.
But that's
If
regardless of a K-8
No.
decision. No, that's what he's just said.
No.
It'll be either it could be at LAD, or it could be,
No, we
So,
100%, we
I don't
will have a
understand this.
program at Ryan Middle School. So we're adding a program to middle school. The question now is, can we use one of the programs that's currently at LAD to offset that cost? Or do we need the LAD program and the Ryan program? So it's an additional cost.
I'm sorry, it's very confusing and conflicting.
No.
Mr. DeCrow?
Mr. Coryell articulated if the IR students remain at LAD and we're unable to shift a classroom to another middle school, we will have a net add of 1 IR classroom in the district.
Yes.
So if existing IR students at LAD currently remain at LAD Elementary School in a K-8 school configuration next year, we will likely need a net add of 1 IR classroom district-wide.
Sorry, can I take one more stab at it? Okay, and
Sure,
either-
Mr. Doran.
Okay, then either I get it or I don't get it. Okay. It's a big if. We are going to have another, you mentioned IR, but another district-wide program classroom at middle school. District-wide programs have moved buildings. They are not intent at necessarily at one building solely. And sometimes it depends on how many students. Some years we haven't had as many students. Typically, they would finish at the K-5 school or K-6 school, and they would move to middle school. That would still, and can still happen, because that's where the program is. Not that it has to be at LAD, so we don't have to create a program, so the 2 questions are separate. Similar to, if I want to say, Two Rivers is a K-8 school. If there's a high-need student, they may or may not stay at Two Rivers. They would go to where the district program is. So they're separate questions.
Well, speaking solely of the programs that exist today, there are 3 programs that exist at LAD. If all of the students that are 6 through 8 at LAD, if they all move up to middle school, then we would need 2 programs at LAD. Regardless of how many students move up, we do not have enough space in our IR rooms to not put a 3rd program in. So the net gain is 1 full classroom, 1 teacher plus paraprofessionals. Our total number of IR rooms will go up by 1.0.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. I think I understand what Mr. Dorn might be getting at, and so let me ask my question, see if I'm saying it through the chair. Can I ask Mr. Dorn? Go ahead. Is it like, why can't the kids who would otherwise go to Ryan go to LAD? Because the issue is that we are putting so many middle schoolers at Ryan that we're adding an IR at Ryan. And that's already a done sort of plan. And then we're saying, we thought those kids from LAD were going to go over to the Ryan program, but now we're not. So we have to have a classroom for them at LAD. And so it's maybe what you're saying is 2 different issues. It is 2 issues, because if we say K-8 and you keep everyone you have, we're at that time also saying $250,000,
Where if we're saying, but all the SPED kids have to go to Ryan who are in your IR program, then we're not saying to, and so that is a huge difference. If you ask me to vote for $250,000 for this program, that changes my mind. If it is a net zero, then it's like, well, why not? But if it's $250,000, that's why not. So that needs to be answered before we can vote. And I understand that it really is two issues. So tomorrow, are we being asked to vote for $250,000 or for net zero? I need to know that.
So I'm going to chime in. I think as you consider this, I think you have to consider that it could be a $250,000 increase. I don't know that it's guaranteed. And that's what Mr. Correa was saying. It's kind of a could be, could not be, because we don't know yet how the enrollment's going to play out and who's going to stay, and are the SPEDS kids going to stay. I don't know, maybe Miss Anthony has a insight on which students would be staying, so we would have more concrete information. But I do think that we have to consider the fact that it could play out that way.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
So I don't think that it's a could be. I think that the board can say, no, we're not having an IR at LAD for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade program. We've already said that, actually. We don't have an IR at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level at LAD today in our plan. And so we would be being asked to give it back. So it's not a what if. It's are we saying you can stay K-8 and keep your IR, or saying you can stay K-8, but the IR kids, my daughter's IR, I have a heart for that, but we already told those IR students that they were going to have to go to Ryan. So we've already said that. And I think that we can maintain that and say that LAD can stay at K-8. I don't really think that that is an issue, because we already said that. And we wouldn't be taking it back or anything. We already said that. And so they're just really two different choices, I think.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I had myself in the queue, and then Ms. Sanderson. I think we need to know for surety what that might be, if we are going to go with that bump, if we're going to keep the IR there or not, because I think it's pretty vital with this vote, especially when we're talking about $250,000, and we've already closed schools, and all of these changes, we need to really be incredibly thoughtful in how we move things and utilize our funding. So if we could get more of that finalized.
So if I understand what Ms. Smith said, there's two choices, one that would cost $250,000 and one that would not. And in her description, LAD would be a K-8, but no IR students would go there. All the IR students would go to Ryan, and it wouldn't be a choice. Did I understand you to say that correctly?
Only
I'm sorry, yes, 6, 7, 8, talking about the school of choice. If you're an IR student, that 6th, 7th, and 8th would not be a choice for you. Am I understanding that right? Ms. Anthony?
Yeah, and you're right. That's how it operates right now. So looking at my numbers, I have 7 students currently out of my 20 in self-contained classrooms that are currently 5th and 6th grade students. So yes, if those 7 students next year stayed at LAD, along with any incoming kindergartners, that would absolutely warrant having 3 classes. If those students moved to the middle school, as we have been doing with the self-contained classrooms, then yeah.
So keeping the original model on how the IR room is structured, those students would be going to middle school IR rooms currently.
Correct.
So then there would be no need for,
Right.
okay. Ms. Smith, Ms. Sanderson.
I was just going to ask Ms. Anthony, what would you need to maintain your school with the K-8 config? And I think I heard it without your IR students. How do you see that working for the new year?
As far as staffing goes, one teacher for the 6th grade and one teacher for the combined 7-8 multi-age would be what we need. So right now we have 2 6th grade teachers and 1 7-8, so it would be a net loss of one of our 6th grade teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any further questions from the board? Ms. Smith?
Okay, so tomorrow when we vote, and that's why we're having this meeting, right, to clarify this. And we vote for, should LAD stay K-8. I'd like there to be clarification from the board when we vote that we're voting to let them create a new SPED program, or as has been done in the past, and we have already decided before, those students will be expected to go to Ryan. So I don't know how we need to do that, or if we need to do, I don't know, I guess I don't understand why that's even in there, or why it was ever sort of put forward. I'm confused on that. But I just want to make it really clear that if I vote tomorrow to keep LAD a K-8 school, it's with the understanding that there's not going to be an additional IR class, however that needs to happen.
That we'll keep the SPED programs, how they're set up currently. And we're only talking about that 6th, 7th, 8th grade classes. Okay. Sounds. Mr. Dorn, did you have a question?
I'm hesitating because I want to make sure that the administration is agreeable with that.
I fully understand, and so just to make one more time, make sure we're all clear that if LAD stays a K-8, then there's no additional SPED class there. That the middle schoolers go to Ryan just as they would have if they're in the IR class, and there will be no additional special education class at LAD.
So can I interject, please? The reason I brought that up was because in other schools, IR students do get a choice. It's a school of choice, and we've offered that. We have 8th graders at Joy Elementary School, so that's why that was brought up.
So, sorry.
Oh, Mr. Dorn, did you have?
Let me defer, and because I've spoken a lot, but I may come back.
Well, I've spoken a lot too, Mr. Dorn. I just wanted to clarify for the public and anyone that's listening who's real concerned about the IR program, that IR students often go to a different building, than their regular attendance area building, that the charter schools don't have IR students, like other schools of choice and lotteries are not available to IR students, and it's not because we don't love them, want to provide the best education for them. It's actually because we do love them and we do want to provide the best education. And we're supposed to provide it in the least restrictive environment, in their school of normal school if possible, and that this school district works really hard to adhere to that and to do that. But sometimes the thing that's really best for students is to be with their peers, and they would have a lot of peers and a lot of programs in
at Ryan, and that this is in no way sort of a punishment, I think, to the IR students that we're talking about, especially because this program doesn't even exist at LAD now. They're already phased out at that age. So I just wanted to make that real clear to the public that this is a decision to do what's actually best for students. It's not just about money.
Do we have any further questions from the board? And do we have any further comments from administration?
So I just want to clarify that if this is the direction we go, K-8, and this is going back to something that Mr. Coryell said, would this be a departure from what we offer for other schools of choice?
It is a departure from what we do at LAD. LAD IR students some of them are staying up through 8th grade.
Just Joy.
Excuse me, Joy, yes, sorry.
Okay. So it would be a departure, but of course, we can depart however we want.
But a continuation of what is currently being offered at LAD.
That's correct.
Correct. Okay, Mr. Doran.
Okay, I will use the term, I think we're running down a red herring. Because LAD or Joy might be the departure. It's not unusual for any of our schools with district-wide programs that the district-wide programs have sometimes changed. Sometimes they change at 3rd grade, sometimes they change at 2nd, sometimes they change at 6th. This is nothing different than we've been doing. We've tried, and I think, and I really appreciate Mrs. Smith's comment about, you know, our district has really done a great job, and they really continue to do that. But we're a district-wide program. It does adjust periodically, and it may vary by school. If, and I was fortunate to host several district-wide programs, and sometimes they changed buildings for a variety of reasons. Also, it could depend, and I'm thinking LAD in particular, the year that LAD was adding a classroom, a full classroom every single month, at least one. It was an amazing year. But that can, if enrollments go up, that can change where this. So we're doing something that's very, very similar that we've done in terms of district-wide programs. We don't move kids unnecessarily. So I beg differ that we're really doing departure. And in this particular case with LAD, we're continuing what LAD has been doing. And the caution that I'm going down my own red herring, I'm going to stop with that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Coyle, did you have any other comments before we move on? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight, Ms. Anthony.
I have one other question, not on SPED, but just for the administration on middle school, things that may impact this.
One more question, sure.
Okay. My question is, do we know when the middle schools are doing their presentations for 5th and 6th grade parents, and is that in this time frame that we're looking at?
Ms. Anthony?
Yes, it's all coming together. So we would have Tanana coming over and talking to our students and letting them know about what it would look like to go to Tanana. At the same time, we would say, hey, this would be what it would look like if you wanted to stay here at LAD. And so they would have both choices, both options available to them, or other options in the district if they wanted to do out of attendance area, I guess. But yes, that would all align together.
And for the other schools for parents who may be applying from the sort of the district-wide pool, they would have the same information from LAD and from the other middle schools.
Yeah, I would hope so. I've already spoken with Ms. LaPlante about just doing a little presentation if this were to go forward to all of the principals at the elementaries, just so I can say, here's some information that you could share with your families as they're making decisions this spring. Having it just on our Facebook page and putting it on the website would be helpful to get it out to the larger community. I met with Janet Ferris, our military liaison, today, actually, as just one of her normal visits. And she said, well, I'll be watching tonight, and if I need to help advertise, I'll advertise, and we'll kind of go from there. So yes, we would need to really help communicate that out to everyone.
Okay. And to the administration, just to follow up, that the administration as a district will be supporting getting word out and helping to promote the information, depending, pending certainly the vote tomorrow, discussion tomorrow.
Yes, if this is the direction that the board wants to go, we'll embrace it with all the gusto that we have behind all the other decisions. So yeah, we'll go whatever direction the board decides.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And just for the public, this will be on the agenda tomorrow for a vote. And so final word will be available tomorrow. Ms. Moline?
Thank you. So next, we have a couple of presentations from our departments. Their budget presentations. So first up, we have Human Resources with Ms. McDaniel. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. I am going to share my screen if I can find it. Here we go. All right, there we go. Thank you. So I am familiar with our board members, but for the listening public, my name is Ivory Ilgen-Fritz. I am the Human Resources Executive Director. I've been with this department for this last 2 school years, and I'm going to give an overview of the Human Resources Department budget and giving a quick overview of what we do in our day-to-day and our year-to-year and how this amazing staff helps support the district as a whole. Obviously, our interest is in supporting our various work groups, and I wanted to give you first a breakdown of what our work groups look like. So we have, and I think that this is a correction from the slides that you have in your packet. There's actually 817 FEA staff. We have 46 FPA staff, which is our principals, our assistant principals. We have 807.
Point of order. I'm sorry, we're getting down to we only have 3 people in the room. Is that an issue?
Not as long as they're actually active in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll continue. We have 819 support staff. So these are those folks that are affiliated with the Education Support Staff Association. Those are anywhere from our secretaries, our custodians, our special education aide. There's a wide range of jobs within the ESSA support staff ranks. We also have our non-represented employees. Those are non-unionized. You will typically find those here down in the ADC, to which the district has 109 of those positions. And then you'll see what is actually one of our largest work groups is our substitute employees and our temporary staff. In all, our district has about 2,600 employees. We're one of the largest employers in our local area. And as we talk about our human resources staff, it's important to note that there is a industry standard that that's typically used. In the last couple of years, we've moved away from it, but it was 1.5 human resource professionals to every about 100 staff. We've moved away from that industry standard for the purpose of when we start to incorporate different programs to help facilitate some of the work we do. But I just give that to you as a benchmark, because that would roughly put you in the 30 range, and you'll see throughout the presentation that we have 16.5 FTE staff that are directly related to the everyday work of the Human Resources Department. Last year, you'll see that we had a $2.7 million budget. What you see included in our budget are those that are indirect to our Human Resource Department daily functions. We have 2 half FTEs that are dedicated to the union presidents of FEA and ESSA. And last year, what you'll see is we had an increase in our overall HR budget, but you'll actually see that there was a decrease in our staffing levels. The increase shows, and we'll go through this, the implementation of a DEI contract. Mr. Rodney Gaskins was issued a contract last year, and that those monies were incorporated into the HR budget, but did not have the direct work on our day-to-day in the Human Resources Department. What reductions that you probably did not see last year is that we did reduce a full FTE. We reduced our training specialist position. We also had 2 positions that went from 12 to 10-month employees. And so overall, we had a pretty great reduction in our budget last year, but it's offset by the addition of the DEI contract. And as we're going through our budget today, I just want to be mindful that there are other positions that you typically associate with the HR department, but they are funded from different sources. So for instance, we now call it our EEO specialist, but you guys may be familiar with our Title IX specialist, who also serves as our student discipline hearing officer. That position is actually funded through the assistant superintendent's budget, but you will see as part of the Human Resources Department in the day-to-day. We also maintain a budget of district-wide funds to help supplement the school's sub-budget needs. We also took recently from that budget the sub-bonuses that we issued back in the fall to help incentivize and recruit subs, and so that also came from that budgeted from that budget. So here I'm just going to give a quick overview of our staffing levels over time. In about the 2014 timeframe, a previous executive director reorganized the department. EEO, labor relations, and HR were separate departments. And so about 2014 is when they all combined together to a total of 13.5 FTEs. And those are 13.5 that do the direct day-to-day work of the HR department. And you'll see that it increased over time up to 18.5 and kind of stayed in that range for a while until where we're at today with 16.5. So again, when you look in the budget book, you'll see that it's actually, I believe, 17.5, but that's because of the union president FTE in there. So in terms of the direct staffing to the HR day-to-day work, we're down to 16.5 positions. That also does not include the reduction that we took last year in terms of turning 2 employees from 12 to 10 months. So what you'll see is while we actually had a decrease last year, it's not changing, there we go. You'll see that we actually had a decrease last year, but because we added the DEI contract to our budget, it looked like an increase. But we actually had a decrease last year, and so we'll see a decrease now in the proposed budget. About 82% of our budget is direct to our staffing. We have both salaried and hourly employees, all are non-represented by a union. We also have purchase services such as professional, technical, legal, advertisement budget. We have, as we talked about, the additional budget for substitutes, and then we have a 4% of our budget that goes towards office supplies, to our different softwares, to the ESSA in-service, the African American Student Leadership Conference, and we also help facilitate Black History Month in conjunction with the NAACP. And so I'm just going to quickly go through each various sections that we have in our department, and I'll give a quick overview of the day-to-day, and then I'll be open to any questions that you have on our HR department. So our first team, we call them teams within our department because we are a little bit large, is our EEO and Title IX. That's led by Allison Baldock, who is our EEO officer, and she is supported by our EEO specialist, and she just recently relocated to Georgia, so we're in the process of recruiting for a new one, and they accepted today. And we also have an EEO and Title IX assistant who provides admin support to that team. And then we have our leadership team, which was myself and Kathy Port, and we're currently recruiting for a new assistant director because after 30 years with this district, in the support staff and teaching positions, and down here at the ADC, Kathy Port is retiring at the end of this year. It's very sad. So we are currently in the process of recruiting for a new assistant director. And as many of you know, Heather Christian, who works as our executive assistant, who is super, super busy up there helping to support all of our needs. And then we have our recruiting and staffing team. We did a great reorganization of this team in the last couple of years. The one thing that we did is we used to have a recruiting and staffing coordinator, and we took that position and revamped it to the district recruiter. That position helps support the Board of Education's strategic goals around recruiting. We have them focusing on teacher recruitment and all of the strategic goals that the board has put in place. So we have 2 recruiting technicians, and Delilah is circled in the middle because her position is actually carried in CARES funds. So she is not part of our hard dollar budget. We have Rachel Stockton, who does most of the recruiting work in conjunction with Delilah. And then the bulk of our team comes with the HR coordinators and technicians, and they really do the bulk of the work in terms of onboarding and maintaining our workforce and supporting their day-to-day needs. They support our workforce and our employees, but also principals, hiring managers, and I'll go through a high list of things that they do here shortly. So we have 2 HR coordinators, we have 2 HR techs, and then we have Karen Machenbacher, who works at our front desk, but also oversees all of our mandatory training and doing kind of a lot of data entry that we have behind the scenes. And then we have Teresa Paulson, who works as our HR assistant, and she is also our note taker for negotiations as well, so plays a big role in labor relations and our negotiations process. And we have Briana. She is our employee relations specialist, and she works directly with supervisors and principals on helping to deal with any issues that come forward with employee issues. So she's there to support in terms of contract interpretation, any internal investigations, evaluation concerns and needs, grievances, just any kind of support that supervisors or principals need, she's the go-to as well. And she also helps manage the leave program for our district. And we have our benefits team. We do partner with a company called American Fidelity. They provide assistance to our open enrollment and for our supplemental benefits. The administration of our health plan is still done in conjunction with the borough. And Briana Carlson really provides that customer service and that direct connection over to the borough and answering any inquiries that our staff have in terms of their benefits and getting them enrolled. And Robin Anderson, we call them the Robins, Robin Anderson does a lot of our behind the scenes, our data reporting, our ACA, she does our state reports. She's kind of our Munis, which is our database guru, in being able to pull data for reports and get that information where it needs to go, and she also helps support with family medical leave. So in terms of some of the things that we do in our day-to-day, I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview, and these are stats as of July 1st of last year. We have posted over 450 job postings. Our dynamic recruiting team of just 2 people have screened over 1,600 applicants for these positions. We have hired 9 new principals into the district, 178 new teachers, 45 new non-rep hires, and 271 ESSA new hires. We've also done a great job this year in terms of how we've reorganized our sub-pool and our sub-hiring, and we have 218 new hires into our substitute employee pool. In conjunction to just our new hires, we've also facilitated close to 100 ESSA internal transfers. We've committed to 45 transfers or reassignments of teachers. We've processed nearly 700 SAS contracts, 80 salary changes for FEA. We've processed 180 requests for family medical leave. Plus, we facilitate the reduction of force, in which the board is going to hear about tomorrow as well, but we implement the reduction in force plan that the board sets forth to us. We're also responsible for contract negotiations. As you know, I'm the spokesperson for the 3 contracts that are open for negotiations. We facilitate all of the internal and EEO investigations that arise. We provide oversight of the evaluation system and mandatory training, which is state requirement. And we do a lot of other events for the type of recruitment, and we also manage the tuition reimbursement. Some of the, and I'm just down to the last couple of slides. In terms of our purchase services, I wanted to create a little bit of breakdown so we knew what that was. That is in direct relation to our labor relations team in supplying funds for any arbitration or legal services that we might need. Also fingerprinting, recruiting, outreach that we do. And in professional and technical, we also run background checks. We do the professional development, such as the ESSA in service. We provide relocation and reimbursements, and this is also where our DEI contract is currently housed. And here is a quick overview of the supplies and materials that we spend our budgeted funds on. Mostly, you will see that's on software. We have our Munis system, we have Frontline, we have iSight that manages our Title IX, and we also have Canvas that helps with our mandatory training. So that's the quick, very quick overview of the HR department and some of the functions that we have. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Mr. Doran.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for the statistics on what your staff does. It's quite a bit.
It is a lot.
I had a question where on the slide regarding the HR budget by the numbers, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So it shows an $80,000 reduction in HR's budget for this year. Could you highlight what's not in there?
The reductions would be the DEI contract is not in the budget for next year.
Okay. And if I might, I have one other question from the budget book. On page 71, under staffing, I was interested in the 20,000 plus drop for the non-represented, same number of FTEs, but lower dollar amounts.
I'm not sure where you're, go ahead, because I'm not sure where he's looking, so go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of different things come into play there, Mr. Doran. One would be the 2 positions that Ms. Ilgen-Fritz referenced that went from 12-month to 10-month, as well as just as a regular part of turnover in staff. Sometimes you have incoming staff members that come in at a lower experience level and could potentially cost fewer dollars.
Okay, so
as a regular part of staff turnover in a department.
Okay, so when we are using averages, how does that play in the other departments?
So these are actuals, not averages.
Okay, and other departments might reflect
Might
averages.
be averages, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions?
May I make one additional comment before we close? I just want to be clear that as we talk about the reduction of the DEI contract, those duties and responsibilities will shift to the district recruiter. So we've hired a district recruiter to implement the recruiting and to strengthen our recruiting department, but also to take on those initiatives that are in the strategic plan that the board has set forth. So while there may be concern about the DEI contract being reduced, those responsibilities would still be within our department to facilitate. So that piece isn't going away. I just wanted to be clear about that.
Mr. Doran?
Okay. I'm going to ask the question, I'll ask it of many departments, I think. If you needed to reduce one position, what would that do? What's the impact on your, and I don't want you to get down to, well, this one versus that, but just
right.
give us a sense.
Right, what I would say is that we did take a reduction last year, really significant. We reduced the training specialist position. We had 2 staff that were reduced to 10-month, which was very painful over the summer to have 1 admin support during our busy recruiting season and one of the busiest times in our HR department. And
It doesn't reflect that in our budget last year because of the inclusion of the DEI contract. I don't know where we would cut because we have worked really hard, both Kathy Port and myself leading this team, to look at efficiencies and streamlining how we can do things, recognizing that we are very low staffed, but we're low staffed, and that's the numbers, because that's what I talked about in the beginning. When the industry standard is 1.5 to every 100 employees, we're half that, if not less. And so we look for efficiencies, we look to continue to streamline, and how can we do things differently but still maintain the services that we have. And any reduction would not allow to maintain the services that we provide. Where would we make that cut? I honestly don't know. We did that with our training specialists last budget go around. I don't know where we would cut that because, and I caution that too, because whatever work we do in our department directly affects our employees, so that work then rolls to our managers. It rolls to our principals, who really cannot take much more on, and it rolls to our hiring managers, our supervisors, and that's a hardship. They can't take on any more at the school, because part of the issue, and I'll stop ranting in 30 seconds, I promise. Part of the issue is that these are state requirements of what we're doing. We have compliance issues with the ACA, with healthcare, with mandatory training. And so we don't have an option to not do those things. And so then the oversight of those then shift to somebody else. And that's where the hardship lies. And so it's who is going to do the work if we reduce, because it's going to have to be put somewhere else. So.
Mr. DeGraw?
And just to add to that, in response to Mr. Doran's question, no idea where the reduction would be made if required. Generally, you look at a department here at the ADC, and we're going to talk a lot about if there's reductions, what services will we have to turn off that we provide to programs and schools and departments, and then B, if there's not, in the human resources department, not a lot of services they're providing that are optional, right? They're mandatory, they're needed, they're vital. They're dealing with the human capital of our school district, and so there's really not a long list, if any, things that they're doing over there right now that could be reduced. So the net effect of what you're going to see is a slowdown of all of the services they're providing. And when that slowdown occurs in recruiting, wow, we're having a hard, we're slowing down recruitment of needed staff. When it has to do with onboarding of staff that we've already hired, wow, there's a slowdown in them getting out to the schools and the departments to work with kids. It's a slowdown of everything, and that would be problematic to really the entire organization. So.
And I just want to re-emphasize what he's saying, because we saw that in real life this last school year. As you saw in the numbers, we've had 460 job postings. We had over, I think, was it 1,600 or so applicants that we had to screen. That would be the duty of one individual person to do that for this district. That's impossible, and that's where we went to Andy and said, we need help, because one, recruiting is hard right now. We have to put a lot of effort into recruiting. We have additional positions because we have the CARES fund and like teacher assistant positions and those types of positions that we had to fill. We had resignations, retirements that we had to work on. So we had a lot of job postings that one person had to facilitate, which is a stopgap for getting employees out into the workforce, into our buildings where they're needed to help support students. So that's where we added in the position of the recruiting technician, the CARES funds, because we needed help. We could not do that with one person. So that's a prime example of we became a stopgap, so we had to figure out how to do something to help support the recruiting process.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, I've got two position questions. Let me come back to the CARES one in a second because it's a little broader. But on slide 2, under the EO specialist, the notation is there that it was funded through the assistant superintendent's budget. Is that last year? Is that this year? I mean,
No, I don't know how. I think since its creation, which I want to say has been about 3 or 4 years, that position has been housed with when Sean Kraska was here, that's when the position was added, and it was under her budget for the assistant superintendent, but it was housed in the in the HR department underneath the EEO officer. So it's always been a part of the assistant superintendent's budget.
Okay, then follow up on that, under the human resources, personnel detail, page 70, the EEO officer is there under HR budget.
So that's the EEO officer, so the Title IX specialist is a different position. So our EEO officer is Allison Baldock. She is in the HR department. The Title IX specialist was Jennifer Zawalski. She just recently left the district, and so we are recruiting for a new one.
For
So
the
those are
Title
two
IX.
separate positions, yep.
Okay, and so, okay, it's not in your, okay.
Correct. It's not in there because it's not part of our budget.
And just for clarification, Mr. Norton, that the position, Title IX specialist on page 94.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So the CARES question I have, and this will have broader implications. So the one position, the recruiting technician is a CARES funded, it's the grant funded, is basically, and so it's part of our budget. That's dependent on our approving the continuation of that CARES grant to be used for that position. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess I'm just getting my head around, the only grant we stick out there is CARES grants. And it's part of our approved budget. But so this is for this position, and I'm sure, and there are others, that we are presuming that they are accounted for in our proposed budget, fully counted there. So
you're correct, Mr. Doran. There's 16 and a half position FTEs in the presentation Ms. Ilgen-Fritz presented, and there's one FTE in that position that's an additional that's not found in this book that would be, that is in the CARES budget that we've put forward to be.
But that's part of our approved, that will be part of our approved budget. It's not a separate, we just know that just as in other grants, there are positions that are part of our budget. There may be a 3-year grant, and we know that's, but if that grant goes away, that person's position may be gone.
You're correct. It'll be part of the approved budget, but just pointing out, technically that position is not found in this book, that one FTE. But the board will approve a spending plan for CARES that will include that FTE.
Okay, plus whatever number other of FTEs.
Absolutely.
Which is not reflected
in this book.
None of those positions.
None of them.
All right, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. And maybe you can just say, see me later. But if I look at the personnel detail, there's the recruiting HR technician, which is the one I identified. It's in this book on page 70. So I'm just, as we go through, I just want to be
There
careful
is
I'm not
one.
redundant and as we go through the budget.
So we do have one recruiting technician on our department that's hard dollar funded, Rachel Stockton. We supplemented and have another recruiting technician that's CARES funded that's not reflected in this book because this book is just the hard dollar budget. So we have a total of 2 recruiting technicians. One is funded through hard dollars, one is through through CARES.
So that's illustrating what you and I were just discussing.
But
Mr. Doran.
federal, I'm sorry, President Luke, if you just give me a little bit of latitude. It's a bigger budget question that I would just want to make sure that I don't have to ask on each department. So when we look at federal grant revenues, that 32 million, which is a significant increase, that includes CARES money.
Yes, the increase, typically that line item is budgeted about $11 million for a
Right.
consolidated grant. So the increase from the 11 to the 32 is CARES, yes.
So CARES is in this budget, but the positions that, do we need to have an individual?
So yeah, the bulk of this book, not all of it, about 98% of this book is the operating fund. And so we don't itemize out. The consolidated grants are not budgeted grants. The board doesn't approve a line by line in this process right here. So it's listed out in the all funds section, but we don't go through in this book and itemize out the appropriations of funding to expenditures. But the board will do that in a parallel process outside of this book.
Okay, so we have X million that are still extra, not accounted for in this book.
About 15 million available for appropriation.
Within this book. Because it's in the revenue, and it's balancing out of revenues and expenditures. So somehow they've been accounted for.
In the all funds list, it's there, it's listed out there. But we won't have a plan for expenditures for those funds in this book. It'll be outside of this book.
Okay, I'll arrange a time to get a better understanding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Executive Director Herbie, who's going to talk to us about communications development engagement.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. So, as Ms. Moline mentioned, my name is Rebecca Herbie. I'm the Executive Director for the Communications Development and Engagement Department, often called Cdne because it's a little bit easier to say. So Cdne is made up of sort of four main areas. We have communications, the print shop, community partnerships, and competitive grants. And I've listed out here sort of just a big overview of sort of the different roles those areas play. In communications, of course, we have the support for pretty much all the district-wide communication needs comes through our department. Any of the large-scale communications, like multiple schools or all district emails, texts, or phone calls, are planned through us. Social media management, so the district's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, that social media presence is supported through us, and also the schools, the support for the school social media, so getting them set up, so it's all set up correctly, and we have access, and then training and support for the schools to have that platform to reach out to families. We also have the website management, and so we have, each school has its own website, the district has its own website. There's about 3,500 web pages between all of those. We manage the web editors, provide training, manage the district website as a whole, offering support and then updates to the website both in content but also template needs and keeping up with best practices. An important piece of that is accessibility compliance. So there's federal requirements for digital accessibility that we have to make sure the district is following or we will get in trouble. And so that follows under us as well. And then a piece of that is also graphic design, photography, videography. So we create materials, photograph students and staff at important events or just classroom photos so we can show kind of what's happening in our classrooms, and then creating short or long videos used to further district communications or assist schools in their communication and different initiatives that the district does. As mentioned, we have the print shop, and so this is the position that primarily supports the print shop is what is being cut in the proposed budget. And so what the responsibilities of the print shop is, so it's for the large scale printings, we have mass production copiers that are about as long as maybe two of these tables. There's one, and then we have another one that's also very big. So you take what you picture of the copiers at the schools and expand that by about 4 or 5 times. That's our copiers we have there in the basement. And so we do the printing, binding, so your coil binding, there's tape binding, there's all sorts of binding options that you never wanted to know that we will do. finishing, so that's folding and cutting and laminating, like whatever might be needed for the different print projects. And then bulk mail services, so when schools need to send out some sort of mailed item to all of their families or our departments, student support services or different HR uses these services as well. There's bulk mail we're sending out to a large group. It will go through the print shop. So I kind of included some of the materials that we print there, because it's like, well, what do you guys do? And so there's a lot of forms. We have worked to move a lot of those forms that could be moved online to make them digital, so it's less resources that are having to be printed. But there are some that they just need a physical copy, and so the carbon copies where you have like the different colors of paper and you can write on it copies, like those sort of multi-part forms come through the department. Lots of different passes. Curriculum materials. There's one that you may recognize. It's called decodables. They've often been called the blended books. They're K2 reading supplements. They're scaffolding. It's scaffolding reading ability is what I was told when I asked about what they do. And so those are curriculum materials that we print, graduation programs. We have post-printing envelopes, brochures, flyers, and like a lot of one-time projects that also happen as well. And grant-funded printing needs come through us too. We have our community partnerships. That one that you might recognize, the largest community partnership we have is Bright Futures Fairbanks, and so there's a community committee, and we have a district liaison on there. Sheena Cummings is our Bright Futures Fairbanks person, and then any MOAs, MOUs, and district and school partner recognition is through us. And then we have our competitive grants. So that is separate from our formula grants that Ms. Marquand is the expert on. We have the competitive grants with Sheena Cummings and Britt Larson. So that's finding the grants, writing the grants, or partnering with the writing of the grants, and then the grant management and helping the training and supporting the grant managers. So we currently have 22 active grants. I took CARES out of that since that kind of skews things a bit. So without CARES, we have 22 grants, just under $6 million that support 23.5 FTEs. And then we have 4 pending grants that we're waiting to see. We've applied for, but we haven't heard if we were going to be awarded them or not. And for 1.1 million or 6 FTEs. And so what does this look like? This is my little web of Cdne. So these are the different positions that we have. And you can see that some of them are interconnected. There are positions that share, or more than one person kind of is cross-trained and supports the different responsibilities. You'll see with the executive director position, I've got some dotted lines going to different pieces, and that's because I'm coming from a communications background. And so especially as we have had the director of public relations position vacant for the last 4 months, we have had the previous director subbing for us, temping for us part-time, but so the needs are still there, and so I'm covering most of those with some help from Briana Carlson. You can see we're vacant right now. We actually just so there was a slight change in the director of public relations, just shifted it a bit and rewrote the position to be a director of communications. And we actually just got an acceptance for a new person who will be starting March 21st, so very excited for that. Briana Carlson is our communications specialist. She handles a lot of the graphic design, she takes great photos of kids. The District Digest is in our internal newsletter that goes out. She's the one that is primarily for the website now, the primary support for the website. And she also assists in the print shop. Her position is actually funded out of the print shop. It was kind of a weird thing that happened when Cdne was formed. You'll see a little bit later, there's 2 positions in the print shop, but two positions in the print shop budget, but one of those is actually primarily used for communication, and that's Briana Carlson's position, this communication specialist. Melissa Davis is the media production specialist. That is the position that is cut in the proposed budget, and she is in charge of print shop and everything print shop. Britt Larson is our grants and partnerships specialist. She does a lot of the MOA, MOUs, small grants, and then Bright Futures, she's a big support for that. And Sheena Cummings, again, is our director of grants and partnerships. She's the one that's finding those grants, leading the grant writing, the grant management, the grant review committee, and our partnership development. I wanted to take a chance and kind of look at the sort of history of Cdne. So this is the FTEs. I went back and looked 10 years, And so you'll see it's a little weird because that's in 5 years ago, Cdne was formed. Before Cdne was a department, and there were sort of separate, smaller sub-departments that were the print shop, grants, and then communications. So I have sort of the separate departments, and then when that blue starts, that's the executive director that started in 2017-18. That's when Cdne was formed. So grants used to have 2.5 FTE. There was a 0.5 admin support that was cut at some point, and they pretty much have just stayed a grants director or assistant director and a specialist. The print shop 10 years ago had 4 FTEs. They were reduced down to 2, and then when Cdne was formed, again, 2 FTEs were kept in that print shop budget, but essentially one is, like, the majority of one is communications. She's sort of backup support for print shop, and she helps, like, with, that's Briana, helps with the billing, and steps in with the print shop as needed. And then we have our 2 communications positions. That was usually there was a director and a coordinator. What happened was moving in from 1920 to our current fiscal year, we have cut a digital communications coordinator. So if you take out the exec director position, we actually have 1 FTE for communications, and that is the director of communications. In reality, it's more 2 with Brenna's position, but it's something that will shift from print shop to communications. So it's just kind of a weird little quirk of the budgets. And then there's the exec director. These are the budget comparison, just to kind of show you how that's changed over the years. So, there were the separate budgets that became Cdne. We have that FTE reduction moving in from the 2021 fiscal year to FY22. There was a digital communications coordinator, and then, digital communications manager. And then moving into the proposed budget for next year, we have the reduction of the print shop, essentially. So I wanted to mention, so we've had a reduction just in the FTEs. Since Cdne was formed, we've had a reduction of, this is including the proposed budget, a reduction of 29% in our FTEs. And since Cdne was formed in the budget, we've had a reduction of 27%. About 95% of our budget is salary and benefits. So whenever we have advertising needs, like if we need to do enrollment or support, for example, our best homeschool, trying to bring in families, we've had to supplement that with CARES funds because we don't, or find it somewhere else. It's not something that's built into the communications budget. We have about 6,000, I think, that's built in for advertising. That's in the budget book that you'll see. So that's just kind of a pretty high-level overview, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Marotti?
Thank you, Ms. Herbie. I'm just wanting to follow up with the testimony that we heard earlier today about how cutting the print shop will actually increase our costs instead of, or that position that does so much for the print shop will increase our costs versus savings. Could you follow up on that?
I can answer it a little bit, and then I'm going to punt it over to Mr. DeGraw. But so the way the print shop works is we purchase the supplies and we do the projects in the print shop. We get reimbursed from the schools, like we set prices, and they're just slightly above what the cost of supplies is. And so we're essentially just trying to cover our cost of supplies through essentially the schools paying us for their orders that we're fulfilling. What you'll see is when you compare our prices to external is it's anywhere from 2 to 4 times as expensive to do locally or online, just because, again, we're basically charging at the cost of supplies. So that's, I believe, what Ms. Soleil was mentioning when she was talking about the potential cost to the district. But I do know essentially the schools pay for their print jobs out of their discretionary funds, and so they would have to figure out how to make it work out of their discretionary funds. So I don't know if Mr. DeGraw has anything to add to that.
I would say that's an accurate description.
Thank you for that. Then I guess why are we doing this if it's 2 to 4 times more expensive to outsource?
So in general, the print shop does not cover, over time, has not covered the costs of staffing that service for the district. And so there is a savings, and it is reflected in the budget, pages 46 and 47. So over time, while the activity has ebbed and flowed in the print shop over time, in general, this building and that print shop is subsidizing costs of those materials and the products that Ms. Herbie illustrated in her presentation. And over time, it hasn't recouped the cost that we've invested in that print shop.
Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's going to be a substantial increase in printing and all the stuff that the shop does. Is that not correct?
As a substantial increase compared to what?
Not having it.
Well, so it'll just push, the schools will then have to outsource this. They'll have to find out, they'll have to find a place to print and have their jobs printed through either a local place, online, or they won't, or to not do it.
So at some point, schools, the prices could have been increased a little so that it could have kept up. Because, I mean, I ran campaigns, I'm saying, I know it's expensive to print, and I did all my stuff locally to try to support local businesses, and that's off the hook. So I'm trying to visualize how that's going to happen for our district without the print shop being on board.
Mr. DeGraw?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ms. Sanderson. One thing, so as we look at this building, and we know there will be significant pressure and significant magnifying glass on this building, as we look at what services and support that we provide, we look at items that we have no choice, we can't eliminate, versus services that we provide that we can eliminate. And unfortunately, is this a wonderful service that we provide to programs in schools and departments? Absolutely. Is it 100% required, similar to EEO and Title IX services? No, it's not. And so at this time, we are subsidizing those services for the benefit of schools and programs. One solution would be to right-size pricing to where it was not a subsidy. And then that would be a reduction that would be a cut to this department by way of increased revenue, so to speak. But in the end, what we've looked at is what services are we providing here at a cost to the district in the budget that are mandatory services and what aren't mandatory, and this fell into the non-mandatory category.
Ms. Sanderson?
Well, as a follow-up, then maybe we should partner with the CTE program and have some students trained to do it and tap some Carl Perkins money for it, but just a thought.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, thank you for the presentation and the details, not only to you, Ms. Herbie, but to all of you. Because as we understand the importance of these things and what are the ripple effects, so one of them is a ripple effect that we might keep in mind is some of these savings within a department may be cost shifts to the schools, which impacts the classrooms directly. So we should keep those factors in mind. Question on the Director of Communications, is that the same one as or I'm going to call it Public Relations, the one that?
Yes, it's a refresh of the PR director. Yes, same position.
That's which we've contracted out for the bulk of this year, but this is to fill it for a full person here.
Right, yeah, the previous PR director has been temping with us part-time until we have a chance to fill that position.
Okay. And the other question I had was in terms of looking at your budget, it's approximately $100,000 less than it was last year. The bulk of that is you're reducing one position. There's also a $40,000 reduction in software. Could you explain why that change is there, or is that shifted elsewhere?
It's in CARES funds. It was shifted to CARES funds. It's for Let's Talk. It's the platform we use on our website for people can send in messages and ask questions.
Okay, if I could do a follow-up on that.
Yes, go ahead.
Then that is in the all funds section? It was
Yes,
CARES funds?
it's in CARES, yes,
In the all funds
correct.
section. Okay. Um, Which, if I am, I'm trying to find it here, which I think I have my note on there, is explain it, because there's really nothing there, but we are putting stuff in there. We're tabulating stuff out of that. Is that correct? That's two items so far.
Yes, we have a detailed CARES list of proposed allocations of CARES funds. We don't have it in the packet tonight. It's in the work session and regular meeting packets from a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Okay, but the CARES, where do I find CARES in this book? You said it's in the all funds. Is it not in the book at all? But it's in our revenues?
So the revenue is itemized in the all funds, on the all funds page. The expenditures, the ultimate approval of allocation of that revenue is not found in this book.
But it's accounted for on the expenditure side?
So
And what's,
let's go to that page in the budget book.
yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So page 15, that's the listing of all funds. Not all of those funds are what are considered budgeted funds. Budgeted funds means that through this budget process that the Board of Education goes through, you as a board are charged with approving the expenditures of those funds. There's 3 funds: the operating fund, the student transportation fund, and the nutrition services fund. So the board is charged with allocating resources associated with those 3 funds in this book. The other funds are, the general term is non-budgeted. Okay, so student activities, for example, those are funds. The funds are raised and expended on an ongoing basis, but the board doesn't approve those. The consolidated grants, I'm not 100% sure about I think the board sees those expenditures and might have an approval through some other process that I'm not familiar with, but it's not through this process. It's a different process outside. So we have a very unique situation with CARES funds, where we are, in essence, running 2 budgets in parallel. The revenue for CARES is listed in the federal programs, but the expenditures, so it's in the, technically for the purpose of this book, it's non-budgeted. But the board will approve an allocation of that $21 million. It won't be $21 million by the time FY23 is over. It'll be about 15, we're estimating. And the board outside of this book will approve in a separate itemized list, will approve expenditures of those funds. And so the expenditure amounts, revenue seen here in all funds, but the expenditure amounts will be approved in a separate document. So the recruiter will be listed out, Let's Talk will be listed out, And right now, that list is at about $10 million in change of what we have in the proposed CARES budget.
If I might have follow-up.
Go ahead, Mr. Doran.
So if I understand you correctly, then, that as departments, and this might be for the administration rather than individual department, as departments present and they say, or we ask what's covered by CARES, they are anticipating to get that. And so as we kind of go through the departments, we should be aware that we are heavily considering whether certain positions or materials, software in this case, or such, we're kind of building the CARES expectation. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so in the department presentations, you're going to hear that some of them positions are funded with CARES funds. So when you look at your CARES list, you'll find where those are in the budget presentations. So that is correct. Mr. DeGraw?
And if it's helpful to the board, we could run the CARES list. We could have that readily available as we go through these departments and be able to visually see those items listed out.
Yeah, it may, I'm thinking that might be helpful. That's why it's, because I'm thinking with HR, right now, there's a position where our presentation is 16 and a half positions, but it's actually 17.5 is what, if I understand what you just said.
Right, it's actually greater than that because you're not including the full FTE for the union president release time. So, right.
But HR positions, you're depending on us.
It's 17.5.
For 17.5, which would be the same, no reduction in staff if that was CARES funded. Whereas it reflects now a one position level.
Correct. The budget book reflects only 16 and a half FTE of what HR depends on a daily basis.
17.5.
And the one more additional is in CARES, yes.
Right.
Any further questions? Ms. Smith?
Are we on further questions in general or further questions regarding communications, development, engagement?
Either.
Okay. This is not regarding CDE. Mr. DeGraw, can you tell me how many FTE we're talking about when we're talking about music, the elementary orchestra and band?
That might be a question that Ms. LaPlante would be better suited to answer. And just to clarify, are you asking how many music teacher FTEs it would take to staff instrumental music at elementary schools?
Right. And so right now we're not staffing instrumental orchestra and band at elementary schools. And if we were going to do that at a minimum 5th grade, what would that mean? How many positions?
To answer most confidently, I would need a little bit of time, but prior to COVID, we needed about 9 positions in order to do that because of how much travel there is across the district. And so you're paying people a significant amount of their time to travel between different sites. Only because of the reduction in how many students we had were we able to require general music teachers to pick up either band or orchestra, or in a few cases both, in order to sort of backfill district-wide instrumental music teachers and get at a place where we could provide that for 5th and 6th grade students this year. It was not ideal, and it was definitely stretching us as far as possible. We thought we were going to do that with about 6 teachers in order to do that, with many music teachers filling in at their schools at something that I don't know that we could sustain. In order to go back to where we had district-wide teachers doing that and not general music teachers doing it because they're going to be working full-time in their own capacity, my guess, but I would really prefer to have some time to look into it, would be about 9 teachers. If I may continue along this line, I believe that we can offer a really strong program at the middle school and high schools with about an addition of 3 teachers, taking the 3 that we have remaining right now in the elementary district-wide program and shifting those to boosting what we are offering at the middle school and high school. I believe that we can provide a more robust middle school experience on a whole.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer, Ms. LaPlante. 9 was the number I did have in my mind because I remember that this entire conversation last year. And I just feel like our community has filled our email boxes, come in here to testify over and over, year after year, that this is just something that they're not willing to let go of. And I took my kids to Northwell Elementary, gave up 25% of my allotment from a different homeschool program just for music, elementary, 4th grade. I went not for middle school, for 4th grade, 5th grade. Then I put my kids at Northwell Elementary so they could go to music. Then my kids went to a charter. We had various reasons. I took those kids from the charter and put them back in our district schools for music. And they are middle schoolers now. And there's no way my daughter would have picked up music at 6th grade if she hadn't had 4th grade. And well, actually, she's 7th grade, in which before we were doing middle school, 7th grade. But anyway, the point is that I really hear these people. And I'm telling you that there's students, 2 of mine, maybe more. My little boys are little still. I got a 4th grader that maybe I will put him in middle school if he could play an instrument. I'm keeping him at a charter school because it's the same difference, right? But if it was like in 4th grade, he could go and get music, I might have put him back to Northwell Elementary. And I know there's a lot of people in this community who are, who want to put their kids, who want their kids to take specialized music. And you can get piano lessons, but trust me when I say you cannot find a saxophone teacher or an oboe teacher. Or, my son was playing bass clarinet. I mean, the cost of a bass clarinet is $1,000. So it's just something that you cannot receive out in the community anywhere for free. And if we're providing an excellent education and an equitable education, I feel like offering music for free is extremely important to me. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but also I think the public feels that way too, that, well, if it's not for music and it's not for specialized sports, I mean, that's why we don't let homeschool kids go to our middle school sports, that they're just going to do their own thing. And that if we want to tell parents that they can trust us and we're going to provide something that they can't get anywhere else, I would personally like to see this board ask the administration to fund elementary orchestra and band in the general fund, so that parents can count on it. It's not CARES money, and it matters. And I just would ask the board and the administration to really look at what can the students receive outside of school. What kind of services, what kind of programs can they get outside of school for free or low cost? Because music isn't one of them. And I know that's a horrible ball to throw back in your court, but I really have my heart on that. And I think the community does too. And if the community needs to go bang on the borough's door for the money for music, we just need to know how much it is. And, but if we add it back, I would hate to see it in CARES funds, and I would really like to see it in the general fund. And I think that we got to find a way to do it.
Ms. Marati, and then Mr. Doran.
I just wanted to state that I agree with Ms. Smith that music is a great way for students to access equity in our schools and for their future. And it was said tonight that by a music teacher, a private music teacher and a public school music teacher, that not all parents can afford it. And our district really appreciates it. And I know that that's going to cause a cut somewhere else because we have to balance the budget. I just hope we can put the work in to see where that might happen.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you. I've got just two general questions. Could you explain on page 145, bridge program is zeroed out this year. It's primarily a rentals. I'm not sure where the other staffing, I'm assuming it's undersped, but could you explain why it's zeroed out? Or where I can find if it's been moved to another heading.
Yes, so in our efforts to balance the budget, we have eliminated that lease payment, and we'll be looking at options on where to house that program.
Okay, so we were able to get out of that lease?
That has not been finalized at this point.
Okay, so at this point, we are committed to that lease. We're hoping to get out.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had, and because it came up a couple of times, and for the public, I'm really pleased that people are going through the budget closely. But I think for clarification, our salary on the chief school administrator has stayed the same. It's basically the same contract as last year minus moving expenses. Those were not not needed this year. And I may be wrong, and so this might be helpful also for our reference point, because I can't remember whether we approved the budget the same date as the contract for a CSA, or well, I thought the contract preceded that, which should have been reflected in that, and then help me out to understand that we also did a budget adjustment approval, which adjusted that with more actuals. So it was all part of the approved budget. So if you could explain that, and I really want to clarify for the public that the contract was not, the superintendent did not get a raise, okay? I think say someone would have loved to have seen something to that, but it was not. It's the exact same contract.
So you are 100% correct, Mr. Doran. The chief school administrator did not receive a $15,000 raise. The $15,000 difference is because that prior year number reflects the number for the prior superintendent. And that's why the $15,000 difference. So from current contract to next year's contract that this budget would reflect, next year's contract, there is no increase.
Okay. And did we approve the contract prior to the approval of the budget in June?
I can't recall the timing of that. All I know is that
we can check on that.
We've already approved the contract for the
Right.
CSA.
I'm thinking for last year, the number in the approved budget listed in here was not the accurate number, and I'm just thinking of timing. So,
correct.
Because I think that caused the confusion for some people, thinking that it was a raise and it was not. And what we might say as a board for public, if any of the public are listening, that in actuality, the salary this is different for the previous superintendent, but there were other benefits that actually were factored in, but, okay. But we do want to make it clear, same contract.
Correct. And just to reiterate, that's a number reflective of the prior position, and regardless, it was either a timing issue where that was finalized after the approved budget was finalized, and if not, that was simply a situation where the new number just didn't get into the book. So, but important to point out that the chief school administrator is not receiving a $15,000 raise.
I do have one quick request. I know that we had talked previously about getting a copy of the contracts that we have broken out by department, like we received last year. Could we get that again, please? Thank you. Ms. Moline, anything else?
That's all we had for this evening.
Ms. Luke?
Oh, Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to Ms. Marati's and Ms. Smith's opinion directive concerning the orchestra and band music in our schools. I heard the assistant superintendent say that we need about nine more FTEs to staff music in our schools, orchestra and band at the elementary level, and it would take an additional 3 at the junior high and the high school level to bring those up to full par. I can't recall her definition, but you know, I really believe that program, if it's important to maintain music at the middle and high school level, you know, if it have it at the elementary level, and the same return. The students aren't going to have the same return at the middle and high school level if they don't have the opportunity at the elementary level. That would require us to ensure that we support it in the elementary level. And that'd be an additional 9 to 12 FTEs. I also agree that it should not be limited to the CARES budget. And I think the school board, I'm of the opinion, the school board, that we should support an additional 9 to 12 full-time employees to ensure that our students receive that. I would love to see the budget reflect as much. I'm not sure what the give and take is. I would leave that up to the district. I don't recall having a candid conversation in a work session where we said, yeah, go ahead and pull out the 12 or pull the 9 music teachers out. But I also would direct the department to put in the additional 9 to 12. And we're going to stand by those music teachers in the sense that it's not funded in the CARES. That's just my position, but it sounds like we're only up to 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sampson. All right, it looks as though, thank you so much from the executive directors for your presentations and coming prepared to answer all of our many questions. We really appreciate that time and the effort that you all place into it. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
We are adjourned.